Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a highly charged, honestly fascinating documentary about Donald Trump. We're going to explore how a billionaire real estate heir used a very specific, deeply ingrained psychological playbook to become one of the most powerful and absolutely most controversial leaders in global history. Now, our goal here isn't to take any political sides, but to clearly lay out exactly what the source material argues about his rise, his tactics, and his impact on the world. Let's dive in. To cover over 7 decades of complex history, we're going to follow the documentary's timeline across 6 quick chapters. A polarizing global figure, cultivating the killer instinct, real estate and media manipulation, reality TV to Washington, turmoil, return and fallout, and finally, the 4 rules of Trump. Section 1. A polarizing global figure. Let's start with the core paradox of the man himself, a guy who completely shattered traditional political norms. The documentary hits us right away with a massive question. How exactly did someone viewed so drastically differently across the globe manage to secure the highest office in the United States, not just once, but twice? The source points out that while unpredictable leaders might be common in some developing nations, seeing this at the helm of the world's reigning superpower, well, that left a lot of people completely stunned. And this perfectly captures that intense polarization. The documentary highlights 2 total extremes. On one side, you've got people who see him as an absolute hero, right? A maverick battling what his supporters call the deep state. But then, on the exact opposite end, his critics label him the biggest joker of politics, or even an enemy of democracy. They point to his chaotic governance and literally hourly policy U-turns as evidence of real danger, rather than just disruption. The documentary uses his own words to emphasize this incredibly unique style, pointing to a history of bewildering, unscientific statements. I mean, things like suggesting we drop nuclear bombs to stop hurricanes or claiming wind turbines cause cancer. Whether you see this as strategic media manipulation or just sheer unpredictability, the documentary argues it represents a leadership style that actively thrives on chaos and completely rejects traditional expertise. Section 2. Cultivating the killer instinct. To really get why he acts this way, the documentary argues we've got to look at his origin story and the intense environment he grew up in. Born in 1946 to an incredibly wealthy New York developer, Fred Trump, young Donald was raised with a silver spoon, but also a really heavy hand. The source notes that at just 13 years old, after actually punching a music teacher in the eye, he was shipped off to a military academy to learn strict discipline. There, he obsessed over being number 1, right down to having the shiniest shoes. Later on, during the Vietnam War, he managed to avoid the military draft 4 separate times. According to the documentary, he was finally medically exempted by a foot doctor who, conveniently enough, lived in a flat owned by the Trump family. But the absolute crucial point here is the massive influence of his father. Fred Trump instilled this ruthless, win-at-all-costs mentality into his son. The documentary shares this really vivid anecdote. Fred, despite all his wealth, made young Donald deliver newspapers. And when it rained, Fred would drive the car, but still force Donald to walk outside in the pouring rain to throw the papers. Why? To forge a fierce competitive edge. His father's ultimate rule was simple: be a killer. Do everything to win. This created a psychological refusal to lose that would literally define the rest of his life. Section 3. Real estate and media manipulation. So, armed with that killer instinct, he sets his sights across the river on the wealth and cutthroat world of Manhattan real estate. The documentary presents a really stark duality of his business era. In the success column, during the 1970s New York financial crisis, he capitalized on empty real estate to build massive triumphs, like the 58-story Trump Tower, famously covered in gold and marble. But look over at the controversies column. The source emphasizes 6 massive corporate bankruptcies, totally failed brands like Trump Vodka, and a major 1964 Justice Department civil rights lawsuit over refusing to rent apartments to black tenants. Yet through it all, the documentary notes, he never once admitted fault. To manage those controversies, he developed this fascinating relationship with the press. Get this, in 1984, he actually called a reporter using a fake name, John Barron. Pretending to be some executive, he fed the reporter a total lie that Donald Trump owned 90% of his father's company. This proves a really early, crucial realization for him. All media coverage, whether it's good, bad, or entirely made up, brings attention. And attention? That's power. Section 4. Reality TV to Washington. By the late 1990s, the source notes his business empire was actually heavily tarnished. But a major pivot to television? That changed absolutely everything. Starring in Mark Burnett's hit reality show The Apprentice, he was introduced to millions, not as a debt-ridden executive, but as the ultimate, flawless symbol of American business success. His iconic catchphrase, "You're fired," completely resonated with the public. The documentary argues this show as the vehicle that scrubbed his image and built the mythical persona that eventually carried him to the White House. It's kind of a masterclass in how television can entirely rewrite public reality. So what does the number 17 mean here? Well, after testing the political waters back in 2011 with a false birther conspiracy against Barack Obama, which the source says was done purely to grab headlines, he officially rode down that Trump Tower escalator on June 16, 2015, using unprecedented, deeply personal insults that traditional politicians just wouldn't dare touch. He completely captivated frustrated voters, and he systematically defeated 17 highly experienced Republican rivals to secure the nomination. Unbelievable, right? Section 5. Turmoil, Return, and Fallout. Winning the 2016 election made him the 45th president, but the documentary points out the real chaos unfolded later. The documentary outlines this truly historic, chaotic sequence of events. First, he lost the 2020 election to Joe Biden, but, sticking right to his father's rule to never accept defeat, he simply refused to concede. Then, just when his political relevance seemed to be fading, he survived a dramatic assassination attempt at a rally. Rising with a bloodied face, he chanted, "Fight," instantly regaining immense public sympathy. That momentum carried him to an extraordinary return, taking the oath of office for a second term in January 2025. But according to the source, this second term came with immediate global consequences. The documentary claims his 2025 return quickly triggered a massive global economic standoff involving Iran. And here is the fascinating psychological trap. Ending this conflict requires accepting conditions that Iran dictates. But as the documentary stresses, accepting someone else's terms registers as defeat. And that's a prospect his deep childhood conditioning strictly forbids him to accept, leaving the global economy basically hanging in the balance. Section 6, The 4 Rules of Trump. So how do we finally make sense of all this? The crucial takeaway from this entire explainer is his core operating system. The source distills his life into 4 brutal rules originally forged by his father. Rule 1, winning is essential. Never, ever accept a loss. Rule 2, do anything for attention. Attention is oxygen, right? Rule 3, never admit a mistake and never apologize. Always counter a talk. And Rule 4, sell dreams via the media because dreams sell far better than reality. It's the playbook, plain and simple. As we reflect on this incredible timeline, from a strict 1946 New York upbringing all the way to a 2025 global standoff, we're left with a really profound question. Has this specific playbook of refusal to lose, relentless counterattacking, and masterful media manipulation fundamentally altered how the world will be led forever? Will future leaders just copy the strategy? It is a pretty wild thought to leave you with. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.